That one was for you, Em. Okay, great. Heart rate training 101 and 201 is what we'll cover today in part 2 of a 3-part series. The first presentation that I did back in June, I can't believe that it's been almost a month since that presentation, was about exercise intensity. And I was talking about exercise intensity as it related to different modes of fitness. We broke it down by cardiorespiratory fitness, muscular fitness, and then flexibility and balance. And I mentioned earlier, if you weren't present for part 1 of this 3-part series, it's no problem. Everything I talk about today you'll be able to understand without having been to the first presentation. If you want the materials from the first presentation, they're available as a PDF on our website. So you can go on to the LifeFit website and you can grab the PDF there. All right. A little overview of what I have planned for today, and as I mentioned, I'm going to address your questions as well. I'm going to give you some definitions related to heart rate training, because I think it's really important to define some of the language and the terminology that's used with heart rate training. Then I'm going to talk about monitoring intensity using heart rate. Hello, come on in. Let's see, do we have enough seats available? We've got one up here and one right here. Come on down. And one, is there one next to Michael too?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent. Good, full house. We like it that way. Awesome. So the second thing that I'll talk about is monitoring intensity using heart rate. And I want to back up for a hot second. Intensity. I want to rewind a little bit to part 1. For those of you that were in attendance at part 1, do you remember the definition of intensity? Yeah. Hey, Asia.
Hey,
I'm going to take us back there because I do think that that is an important piece. So I think we got to define that first. So this was the first presentation in our exercise, and in fact, while I'm here, let's do this. Part 1 was exercise intensity. What is it? Why is it important? Part 2 is heart rate training 101 and 201, and part 3, I highly encourage you to come to, is purposeful intensity. And that might address some of these questions: training for performance versus training for fitness, training to improve fitness versus weight loss. That's more so what I'm going to address in part 3, but I'll touch on it today. Yeah. So August 10th, mark your calendars. August 10th is part 3. Intensity. What is it? The measurable amount of a property. So it's the degree or amount of strength or power or force that something has. I'm going to go through that one more time. The measurable amount or the degree of strength, power, or force that something has. And we broke that down by what does that mean in terms of how do I measure intensity for cardiorespiratory exercise? How do I measure it for muscular fitness? How do I measure it for flexibility and balance? And it's measured differently for each of those components of fitness. Today, we're talking about heart rate training, and I'm going to tell you in a hot second here that heart rate training is probably best applied to cardiorespiratory fitness as a measurement of intensity. And we'll break that down a little bit. All right. Back to our heart rate training 101, 201 full screen. I'm also going to cover today the MyZone heart rate system. Quick show of hands, those of you in the house who own a MyZone heart rate monitor. Woohoo! All right. If you don't own a MyZone heart rate monitor yet, they are available at the service desk for purchase, and I'll give you some more information about that. But I'm going to tell you about the heart rate system, MyZone. And then I'm going to briefly give some program design recommendations for using heart rate. So this starts to get into part 3, purposeful intensity. based on my fitness goals, how do I design my fitness programming accordingly so that I can achieve my goals? Are they fitness related? Are they weight loss related? Are they performance related? And my training might look a little bit different depending on what my goal is, my endpoint goal. All right. Any questions so far given the presentation overview? Moving right along. Heart rate training. Let's go through some terminology and define it. Some really important terms to understand when we talk about heart rate training. First one is heart rate. We measure heart rate in beats per minute, the number of times per minute that your heart is beating. Lots of different ways we can measure that. With heart rate training, most often we use a heart rate monitor. A chest strap is probably the most accurate. Second term, resting heart rate. I want to point out on the screen, resting heart rate and recovery heart rate, two different things. Resting heart rate is your heart rate when you are at absolute and complete rest. The best time to measure your resting heart rate is while you are sleeping or right when you wake up in the morning. So for those of you that have a MyZone heart rate monitor, the best way that you can assess your resting heart rate is to either wear your belt to bed, if you can tolerate sleeping with it, or have it on your bedside, and right when you wake up in the morning, put the belt on, make sure you hear one beat because that means it activates, and then lay there for another 5 or 10 minutes and let the belt obtain your resting heart rate, and it automatically saves and updates in our system. So it's then recorded and logged. One of the ways that we can use resting heart rate is we can use it to measure fitness improvements by monitoring a decrease in resting heart rate over time. So I think, Lorenzo, one of your questions or someone else's is where should my heart rate be at rest, right? In general, for adults, between 60 and 80 beats per minute is a normal resting heart rate range. That's a big range. That's 20 beats per minute, right? It's a little bit different for everyone. My husband is an athlete, and he was a sprint performance athlete, and now he's crossing over to be more of an endurance athlete. For some odd reason, I don't know why, I mean, I've always known he's odd, but for some odd reason, genetically, his resting heart rate is higher. So even though he's an athlete, his resting heart rate is around 70 beats per minute. Mine's 40 or less. So that's very different. That's a 30 beat per minute difference. His max heart rate, as measured, is 216, which is way high. Mine's 190. So there's a lot of differences from person to person, right? So resting heart rate, 60 to 90 is the general range. That would be a normal resting heart rate. The more you train from a cardiorespiratory perspective, your heart rate, your resting heart rate should decrease over time. That's an indication of the efficiency of your cardiorespiratory system, your heart, your lungs, and your vascular system. Your heart is able to put out more blood per beat and is able to put out more blood per minute. Your lungs are able to take in and process more oxygen and deliver it to your body to use. So over time, your heart doesn't have to beat as many times because it's putting out more volume per beat over time. Make sense? So we can use that to show an improvement in our cardiorespiratory fitness. So before you start a particular training program, assess your resting heart rate at the beginning. Then after 4 or 8 weeks, assess it again and monitor how it drops. I know we've done that in Strength for Living, and I know people have seen significant decreases in their resting heart rate over time. On average, you could expect to see between a 10 and 30 beat per minute drop, depending on where you started from. The more trained you become, the smaller and smaller the decreases in your resting heart rate will be until eventually you probably plateau off. I mean, I wouldn't want mine to get much lower than what it is now because I'd start to be concerned that I was alive, which is a good thing. But eventually it will plateau. Ambient heart rate. Has anyone heard of that term before? I think that's a term that's becoming a little bit more popular in the fitness industry across the general population more so. So I want to define it just in case you hear it. Ambient heart rate is your cruising heart rate during the day. So while you're sitting here right now, your heart rate right now would be an ambient heart rate because you're in a rested position, but it's not your resting heart rate because you've been in a wakeful state, you've probably had a meal, you've maybe had some caffeine. So your heart rate right now is what we would consider ambient heart rate, not resting heart rate. You can also use ambient heart rate over time to monitor fitness improvements. That's a little bit trickier than resting heart rate, and here's why. There are so many factors that influence heart rate. Sleep, stress, food, right? After we've digested or after we've eaten a meal, our heart rate elevates a little bit. So if you're going to use ambient heart rate as an assessment of improvement, you'd want to keep as many factors as consistent as possible. So if you measure your ambient heart rate at 1220 and you've had 8 hours of sleep and you've eaten lunch and breakfast and you've had 1 cup of coffee with 1 sugar, 1 creamer, then you'd want to replicate that at a follow-up assessment so that all of the other factors, or at least as many as are possibly under your control, are consistent. Make sense? Awesome. Submaximal heart rate is your exercise heart rate at anything less than maximum. Pretty easy. Your exercise heart rate, so that's the whole range between resting up to maximum, is a submaximal heart rate. That's how we're going to define our heart rate intensity zones. There's submaximal zones, you can push up to max. That's very challenging to do. Maximal heart rate, affectionately known as MHR here forward in the presentation. Your maximal heart rate is the number of beats per minute that your heart is capable of producing. The MyZone system estimates that. If you wanted to get a true max heart rate, you'd have to do a maximal exercise test. We'd put you in a gas mask and collect all that data. And typically, if you're doing a maximal test, it's best to do that in a clinical facility where you have clinical supervision. All assessments that we do here at the LifeFit Center are considered sub-maximal assessments. They do offer through PECS, the Physical Training and Exercise Laboratory, the exercise science realm of the kinesiology department. What does PECS stand for, Asia? Help me. Physical something something, PEXS. Yeah. Cool acronym, can't quite remember what it stands for. But the exercise science department runs maximal testing. So they will do a maximal oxygen uptake assessment for you should you desire to do that. You do strap on a mask, you're breathing through a mask, and you are going to exert yourself to a level of maximal exertion. This is not an easy test. This is a maximal effort test. And then based on that test, we can get an idea of what your true max heart rate is and what your true aerobic capacity is, your oxygen consumption levels are.
Is there any risk in getting your maximum? Is there a risk of heart attack?
Sure. As with any exercise, there's inherent risks. You wouldn't be at any additional risk unless you had a pre-existing condition, a cardiovascular condition. That test could exacerbate a condition. Yeah, so that's why we generally like to do that in a supervised facility. Yep.
Physiology of exercise, PEX, and sports lab.
Say it again.
Physiology of exercise and sports lab, so the PEX is PEX.
Got it. Physiology of exercise and sports lab. Josh Cotter, Evan Schick. Cool. Okay. MyZone, our system, our heart rate monitoring system, estimates your maximal heart rate with this equation. You've probably heard of the general equation, which is 220 minus your age. Over time, we have found that that is not very accurate, so to be more and more accurate, more and more testing has been done, and they've come up with different normative equations. This is the best equation on the market at the moment, which is 206.3 minus the product of 0.711 times your age. So in the MyZone system right now for you, your max heart rate is calculated in that way. This is going to be accurate for most people, but not for everyone. So what we can do is we can go in and adjust your maximal heart rate as needed. So if you're exercising and you're finding that you're hitting yellow and red, which are like high intensity zones, but you only feel like you should be in the blue, which is a more moderate intensity zone, that means that the system has underestimated your maximal heart rate and we need to bump it up. One of the cool parts about the MyZone system is if you hit a new max heart rate, it automatically updates in the system. So it'll automatically update that new max heart rate for you. But if the system has overestimated your max heart rate, then we need to manually go in and make the adjustment to bring it down. Does that make sense? Cool. And I'm happy to talk to someone more about that. And
if you feel that,
yep.
How do you determine it? I mean, once you get your number,
Yep.
and then, you know, like my number is like 162
Yep.
based on that equation.
I love that you know your number.
Well, I just did it.
Oh, okay. I love that you have resources.
Well, so my heart rate in MyZone is higher than that.
Yep.
But I forgot my question. It's like, how do you, is it based on how you feel? Okay. It's based on how you feel.
We use a checks and balance system. So if one method is this equation, and so we have this estimated equation of maximal intensity, and that's based on heart rate percentage, our heart rate training system. Then we have rate of perceived exertion, and we have a talk test. This one's objective, these ones are subjective, and we use checks and balance. We measure the subjective system by using these subjective assessments to check in, and vice versa.
Okay.
So for example, MyZone underestimates your maximal heart rate. Because it underestimates it at 162, but it truly is.
I think it's 173. Is that right?
Yeah, okay, so 11 beats per minute higher, right? So what you would have noticed initially is that you would be popping into yellow and red, but you'd only feel like you were in like green or maybe yellow. And what's hard, because I know that we're going to need to talk through this part too, that's what you would have felt at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so then we would have bumped your max heart rate up. Now what you'll experience, because this is a training effect, the more fit you become, the harder and harder it should feel to get into yellow and red. I don't know if any of you are experiencing that phenomena yet. It's because our heart and our lungs and our vascular system become more and more efficient. It takes more and more of a workload, more and more of a stimulus to get them up into those higher intensity zones. Does that make sense? I have to we talked about this a little bit in part 1. So let's use the treadmill because that's an easy example. I maybe was running or let's do walking. I was walking at 3.5 miles an hour and I was at an incline of 1%. And when I first started training, that would get my heart rate into the green zone, maybe even a little bit of the yellow zone, right? If I continue to train with that workload, over time, I'm probably going to be able to be in the blue zone while I'm walking at 3.5 at an incline of 1%. So that means I'm either going to have to increase the speed or increase the incline to challenge my intensity back up to a higher level. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that's why it's important that we play around with the number if it's not quite right for you, because we need to be as accurate as possible. And it can be a trial and error system where we go up a few beats. Does that feel right over time? I wouldn't want to change things based on one day. I want it to be a consistent, like over a week or so of assessing and then making changes. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Okay, sweet. Recovery heart rate. Definition of recovery heart rate is how quickly your heart rate can recover down after it's been up at a higher level of intensity. And that can either be at the end of your conditioning period when you're going into your cool down, or if you're doing something like tempo or interval training, your recovery happens after the end of a higher intensity bout. So it's how quickly you can recover your heart rate back down. And again, that's a sign of the improved efficiency of your cardiorespiratory system. When you introduce a stimulus, your cardiorespiratory system can respond. When you decrease that stimulus, boom, your cardiorespiratory system can recover closer back down to resting levels so that it's ready to go again when you put the stimulus back on. So it's an indication of improved efficiency and improved fitness. Any other questions on these terms at all? All right, so now that we're clear on the terms, we're going to move right through. Monitoring intensity using heart rate. Modalities of exercise that are most appropriate for using heart rate as an indication of intensity are cardiorespiratory fitness, we affectionately call that cardio, and then resistance training if you are doing a circuit or a continuous style of resistance training where your heart rate is elevated over time. If you're doing hypertrophy, strength, or power training, you should be doing a set with a certain number of reps, and your heart rate probably will come up actually pretty high during that, but then you're taking an extended rest period in between, 2 to 5 minutes, where your heart rate is dropping back down closer to resting levels. So you're not really training your cardiorespiratory system. A little bit, but not a lot. You're training your musculoskeletal system, right? If you're doing circuit or continuous resistance training, you're probably going to take your heart rate up and keep it up over time. So you're getting muscular fitness and cardiorespiratory fitness at the same time. It depends on what your goals are. Because continuous or circuit training more often is associated with muscular endurance. So if you want to train for hypertrophy, strength, or power, you're going to have to train differently than a circuit or continuous training. And we can get a little creative with that because we can do things like supersets, where I train one muscle group, and while that muscle group rests, I go and train another muscle group. So I can keep my heart rate up a little bit when I'm doing some of these other types of training. But to really reap the benefits specifically of these types of goals, hypertrophy, strength, and power, you have to give yourself recovery periods in between. Make sense? So using your heart rate monitor during yoga, unless it's like a very vinyasa flow, giddy up and go yoga. I mean, cool if you want to see what your heart rate's doing during that time, but it probably really shouldn't be much more than in gray and blue, which are lower intensity zones, lower to moderate, right? So you can choose when you want to wear your heart rate monitor, but during purposeful activity of cardio and circuit or continuous resistance training are the best times to use it. Okay, so monitoring heart rate, why do we do it? The same reason why it's important to measure intensity, to make sure that we're hitting our goals. If we have certain goals, we have to monitor what we're doing in our everyday training so that we can hit and meet the goals that we've set forth for ourselves. So how do we measure it? We use a heart rate monitor. There's a ton of heart rate monitors out on the market. The best that I have seen are Polar, Garmin, Suunto puts out a really nice one, and then of course MyZone. And we've chosen to carry MyZone here at the LifeFit Center because it has so many cool features. We can display your heart rate live in the facility, which is awesome, and because it's a Bluetooth monitor, you can monitor it on your smartphone. So for us, MyZone was the best choice of a heart rate monitoring system. I want to show you a quick little video about MyZone, what it is and how it works. And many of you who are currently using MyZone might even find some new information in this video. We'll see. So for those of you who don't yet have a MyZone monitor, or even those of you who do, one of the most awesome features is that it measures relative intensity and gives us that feedback. So it's measuring intensity relative to you. So that in a class, if I'm coaching for folks to be in the blue zone, that's your individual zone. So it means that we can all be exercising together and we can all have very different max heart rate, we can have very different resting heart rate, we can have very different fitness levels, but we can be working in similar intensity zones in a group fitness class. Or if I'm training like a Strength for Living group and we're working toward a particular intensity range, if we're doing our tempo training or our threshold training, then we're all training in those same intensities toward a common goal. Pretty cool. So I want to define the zones of MyZone, and if anyone has questions about the MyZone system and what it can do, what it's capable of, then we'll talk about that too. And I know you might not be able to see these very well, so I'll make sure I go through each of them and verbally let you know. The gray zone in MyZone measures 50 to 59% of your maximum heart rate. That's considered a moderate intensity zone. Another really cool feature of MyZone is that it offers you MyZone effort points. We call those MEPs. You get 1 MyZone effort point per minute that you're in gray. Here's what the MyZone effort points mean. MyZone was really smart. They're the only heart rate monitoring company that's done this. The American College of Sports Medicine put out guidelines. We've gone over those a lot. Those guidelines say that you should, as an adult, to be healthy, accumulate 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardiorespiratory exercise per week, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise per week, or a combination of the two. So MyZone monitors how many MyZone effort points you're accumulating in moderate or vigorous intensity zones, and it's sending you an email, you're probably getting these, saying, congratulations, you've met the recommended guidelines for physical activity. Some of you are probably getting that email during your first or second workout of the week. That doesn't mean, hey, good job, you can take it easy the rest of the week. That means you've met the minimum. For you, that's not your goal. You have above and beyond the minimum as your goal, which is awesome. But it's letting you know, and that's a wonderful thing because it's incentivizing consistency of meeting the recommended guidelines over time. Because there's also such a thing called MyZone status. I don't know if you knew that. But you can look on your account on MyZone, and you can see up at the top, and on the app up at the top, it tells you your status. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and brag just a small little bit. Right now, I am diamond status. Oh. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. The only level above diamond is Hall of Fame, and I will get there in 10 short months. And it's not rewarding me because I'm working out all the time. It's rewarding me because every month for 3 years, I've hit the minimum recommended guidelines. That's how you move up in your MyZone status. If you meet the minimum recommended guidelines each month, over time, you move up in your status level. And you can check out what those are. You can click on it on your user's page when you sign in, or on the app, and it'll explain to you how you progress through the different status levels. But what I love is that rewards consistency. It doesn't reward going all out for 2 days, getting burnt out, and then not coming back. It rewards being consistent over time, and I dig that. So those are MyZone effort points. You'd want to earn about 300 per week or 1,300 per month to meet the minimum guidelines. Many of you are earning many more MEPs than that. Blue zone is between 60 to 69% of your max heart rate. It's a moderate intensity zone, and you earn 2 MyZone effort points per minute that you're in the blue zone. Green is between 70 to 79% of your max heart rate. It's considered a moderate to vigorous intensity zone. Anything above 75% max heart rate is considered vigorous. So the green zone is a little bit of a hybrid zone. It's a little bit moderate, it's a little bit vigorous. And you earn 3 MyZone effort points per minute that you're in the green. Yellow, 80 to 89% max heart rate, vigorous intensity zone. When you're in yellow, it should feel hard. Yeah? Okay, good. Otherwise you need to adjust your maximum heart rate. And that's 4 MyZone effort points per minute. Red is 90% or above of your max heart rate. And it's a vigorous intensity zone. 4 MyZone effort points per minute in red as well. They did not want to add additional effort points for red because whereas it's good to touch red, it's not always great to spend a ton of time in red, and so they didn't want to incentivize people above and beyond to get into the red all the time. It's actually not good because our bodies aren't made to go all out all the time. They're made for variety. So if we have a day that's more yellow and red, it's good to follow that up with a day that's either a rest day or a day that's more blue-green. Does that make sense? Cool.
Question.
Yeah.
So if you're at a workout, you know how we're doing intervals of like 2 minutes, 2 minutes, right?
Yes.
If you're increasing and you're in yellow, but
Yep.
in the last 2 minutes you're in red.
Yeah.
Is that not okay? I mean, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I
Like
do
you're,
know.
you're going and you're feeling you're the same, but your heart is telling you differently that you're going in red, but you do feel. I don't feel the intensity as red until like probably the last minute.
Yes.
But I'm already in the red
Yep.
the 3rd minute.
Exactly. And that's just a phenomena of working at that workload over time. Your heart rate is responding by increasing to meet the load. And by the end of that, like let's say we're doing our 222s,
Yeah,
2
yeah.
minutes in green, 2 minutes in yellow. At the end of the yellow stint, you're getting close to red, if not in it. Totally normal, totally cool. And that's why we follow that up by coming down and going back down into green. Because we've come up, then we come down. And it'd be fine to have a day where you have 10, 20 minutes in yellow or red. That's a tough day. Hopefully you're feeling your Wheaties that day. And if you're doing that, that'd be important to follow that day up with a more blue or green day, a lighter day. Does that make sense? Because if we're in yellow and red, that means that we're taxing our cardiorespiratory system. We're also taxing our nervous system, and we're probably taxing our musculoskeletal system. And it's important to allow all of those systems rest and recovery so that they can make the adaptations that are necessary to be able to boost and move on. Does that make sense? If you're constantly breaking down, your body doesn't have time to build back up. And we need that in order to be able to adapt and move on and move forward. Overload is important, but then you also have to offer rest and recovery to make the necessary adaptations to move forward. Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier about the talk test.
Yes.
Where, I mean, would that fall into one of these areas?
One-
And you can still pass the talk test, however that works.
100%. Let's review that quickly. In the gray zone, we should be able to carry on a pretty fluid conversation. In the blue zone, we should be able to say a sentence or two at a time, no problem. When we start to get into the green zone, I might struggle through a sentence before I need to take a deep breath. When I start to get into the yellow zone, maybe we can say 3-4 words at a time before we have to take a deep breath, and it's uncomfortable, right? And then in the red zone, it's kind of like, I don't even really want to talk, let alone, you know. So you're just really focused on breathing at that point. So that would be the talk test as it relates to the zones. Yeah, exactly. It's a good one to use because sometimes I watch this in class because I teach some of our group fitness classes. And if I'm watching people and they're in yellow and red and they're in the back carrying on a conversation, then afterwards I'm like, no, you need to adjust your maximum heart rate. Because you should not be able to be talking that much and be in yellow and red. That means that your heart rate's inaccurately estimated in the system, right? Glad you're earning all those MEPs, but they're not real. So we have to make the adjustment, yeah.
So when my son sends you that email after a workout and tells you like your average effort for
Yeah.
that workout, sometimes I feel like I really worked out hard.
Yep.
And it's like average 80. And I'm like, I feel like I worked out more than 80%. So am I just interpreting
Got it, because that's your average intensity over the entire workout. And so to take into account how long you've worn your belt, because if you put your belt on a while before class, then that's going to weigh into the average. So maybe you're cruising for a long time in gray or below, and then you do your exercise, and that actual average of your exercise might be more like 80 or 85%, which is high. That's vigorous intensity. But then if you have your belt on before and after, and I do this all the time, I'll finish my workout and I'll have my belt on for 10 minutes after I forget to take it off. I guess that cues you in on how frequently I shower after exercise. But then my average will tell me that I was at 65% max effort, and I was like, no, look at the profile. But it's because you had your belt on that whole time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So look at the color profile and take that into account. Yeah, great question. Yes.
How quickly should we recover to our recovery heart rate?
It depends. So one of the assessments that I like to use is a 1-minute recovery heart rate assessment, either at the end of a workout or at the end of a higher intensity bout. And I would say over time, so it's not as important as how much you recover is not as important as if there's an improvement in how much you recover over time. So let's say you do your first 1-minute recovery assessment, and your heart rate recovers by 10 beats per minute in 1 minute. What I would expect to see over time as you're training is in 4 to 8 weeks, instead of recovering down by 10 beats per minute, maybe you're recovering down by 20 or 25 beats per minute within a minute of recovery. Does that make sense? That's relative to each person. So you'd want to take your initial assessment, see how much you recover, and then continue to measure that over time. Kind of like resting heart rate, right? So we're all going to start from a different place, and then there should be a training effect. Yeah.
So if I keep it on, like you said, for the resting portion of it, then it records, and then that day I come and work out, does it, because there was a gap within a couple hours, is it going to record my resting on my chart, like on my calendar? So I noticed that if I do 2 workouts in one day, it takes away the other one, and then it doesn't add them together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it should show you 2 different moves. They should both be recorded. One at one time and one at another.
I have to double check.
Okay.
I took it away.
I'm happy to sit down and look at your calendar with you. We can do that. And your resting heart rate isn't going to influence the output that you get in the MyZone system based on your workout. That's just going to be a number that's recorded in your user profile. So your resting heart rate, the way that we're recording heart rate, your resting heart rate is not going to influence your percentage of maximal heart rate. There's a really cool way of measuring heart rate called the heart rate reserve system. We're not going to get into that one this time, but that would take into account resting heart rate. But this system does not take that into account. Any other questions about the zones? The MyZone zones or the MyZone system?
Does it record sleep patterns?
It does not. So that's something that like a Fitbit or another wearable device would do. It's so funny, there's the only device that I've found that kind of does everything is the Garmin. But even that doesn't do all the things that a Fitbit does. So if you wanted to measure sleep patterns and you wanted to also get performance metrics like pace and different things, you'd have to wear a Fitbit, a Garmin, and a MyZone. So you would be one teched out. Yeah. I know, you would be well monitored. Yeah. So I guess maybe that's how we should make our millions, is to just come up with that device, right? Yeah. Here we go. Trademark. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Lorenzo.
So your earlier example of the treadmill.
Yes.
It's a great example because that's what I do to kind of warm up, with my eating strength with it. So I've gotten to the point where a 2% incline doesn't do as far as like perceived heart rate and all of that exertion. I can before I that was not the case.
Yes.
I mean, I was couldn't even say a single word.
Right.
And when somebody was talking to me, I had to really think clearly what the two words I would be using to answer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, totally.
So, but I've gotten to the point where now, 2.5, I can, I'm good, but
Yeah.
3% incline,
Uh-huh.
I'm back again to the point where I cannot, I cannot just, hey, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I've kept the same time,
Uh-huh.
So, what is your recommendation, as far as like what should I address, if I want to continue, my training in this? Do I increase the incline or do I just continue time-wise?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and this is why exercise is so much fun! Because there are so many variables that we can play with. We can play with frequency, how often you're exercising or you're working on the treadmill. We can play with intensity, how much your heart rate comes up, right? If you're going faster or you're adding incline. We can play with duration, how long you perform your exercise, and we can play with type or mode, the different types of exercise that you're doing. So what I recommend doing is picking one variable at a time and manipulating that. So for example, let's do the treadmill example. If you're at 2.5 incline and you're going at a speed of 3.5, 4 miles an hour, right? That's legit. And you're working and you've now kind of plateaued at that point, then I would recommend first starting with increasing duration. So if you're now working at 15 minutes, bump it up by about 5 minutes and go to 20 minutes and see what that does. And then you can start to play with the other variables. Either you can add speed or add incline once you've added a little bit of duration. Does that make sense? Or you can add frequency. So let's say you're working on the treadmill twice a week now, add one more day, add a third day in. Does that make sense? So there's so many variables that you can play with. This is what we're going to talk about in part 3, purposeful intensity. Because you got to pick which variables are going to work right for you. And if you're not sure or you're overwhelmed by the number of variables, we have many, many capable fitness professionals at your fingertips here at the Life Fit Center that you can ask those questions to. But pick one variable at a time. So for you right now, Lorenzo, I'd recommend amping up the speed a little. Because if you're already at 2.5 on the incline, then try to go a little faster and see how that feels. Yeah, and try that for the same duration that you're at now, especially if you're using it for a warm-up. Yeah, does that make sense? Awesome, you got it. Any other questions? Yeah.
I hate the chest belt, so I have this one.
Yeah.
The Amazon,
Uh-huh.
you have to buy, or you have a program. I can, and then I use my coach to do similar thing with my track on. Can I use that one? I mean, my system, my zone, you have to buy stuff, or I cannot get just a program.
The only thing that you'd need to buy with MyZone is the heart rate monitor, the chest strap. But if you wanted to use your system, you absolutely could, and you could apply all the same information to your system. Yep. Yep. Yeah. A wrist monitor is generally not quite as accurate as a chest strap, but
It's not. It's here.
up here.
Yeah. Or here, any place, even the head.
Monitoring your heart rate?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Cyclists use it. On
Yeah.
I was
Fascinating.
going to bring it. But
Yeah, bring it in sometime. I'd love to see it. So yeah, you can use that same system, but apply these principles.
My zone does not offer the program. They just monitor, right?
They offer monitoring of your intensity, so it's a software, but the software wouldn't be compatible with your device. It's only compatible with the MyZone device. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. We can talk more later too if you want. Any other questions? Okay, ladies and gents, we've come to a very critical point in the presentation, which is the dance break. So I'm going to play the little clip. We might need to dark it out a little bit in here. Before I dark it out, I want you to stand up, because that's the whole point of the dance break, is to stand up, right? We got to apply these not sitting for extended periods.
That's right.
You know, we learned that. And then if you want to follow along,
Next to you.
is that too dark or are we okay? Really, I welcome you to replicate any of these moves you want. Happy ending. That ends our little dance stretch break. Oh my. Quick little fun fact about that clip. When I was a little girl, I truly believed that that was my mom. Because my mom looked exactly like that when I was a little girl. How fun is that? I was like, Mom, your movie's on. Okay, so just a quick review. I'd already mentioned these, but I want to go back through them really quickly, and then I'm going to move into the conclusion. The guidelines that were put out by the American College of Sports Medicine, these are as they relate to our MyZone zones. 150 minutes of moderate intensity a week, that would be the blue and green zones. Or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity cardio per week, so that's just 25 minutes 3 days a week. Or 30 minutes 5 days a week for moderate. Yellow and red zone. Okay, if you go to Crank Fusion 3 days a week, you are getting way more than this, which is fine. It just means you're going above and beyond meeting the minimum, but it's important that you're sprinkling in some blue and green days in between, right? Cool. Or a combination of the two. So maybe you're going to do 2 or 3 days at a pretty high intensity and 1 or 2 days at a more moderate intensity. Beautiful. I'll give you a specific example of that. Crank Fusion. If you're doing Crank Fusion 2 days a week, and then let's say maybe you're going to do Fit and Fun, or something that would be a little bit more moderate intensity, another 2 or 3 days a week. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I just wanted to throw in resistance training, a reminder. The resistance training recommendations are separate from cardio. So just meeting the cardio is great, but in order to be completely healthy, we need to do resistance training. And it's recommended that we train all major muscle groups at least 2 days a week at minimum. Now, you can double dip a little bit, like I mentioned. You can be doing muscular endurance activities that also are training cardio. So you can double dip a little bit. Yeah.
Question.
Yes, fire away.
So like fit camp.
Yes.
Like Asia's class, is that kind of, that's intense.
That's also high intensity. So you're doing high intensity probably 5 days a week. We'll talk more, gals. We'll talk more. Seek me out. We'll talk
I'll
more.
seek you out.
Okay, perfect. Great. Oh, we don't need another dance break. Okay. So to start to get into what part 3 will be, I just want to offer a little bit of foreshadowing. Heart rate intensity related to fitness goals. This would be different if we were training for performance goals. That's going to be part 3, incorporated with this. If you are a beginner to exercise, which hardly any of you in this room are, because I know you focus more on building an aerobic base, and I color-coded these because that means you want to spend more time in the blue zone or the green zone while you're building your base. If you're an intermediate exerciser, you've been exercising for 3 to 6 months consistently, you've built your base, then you can start to expand your capacity. You can start to work more in the yellow zone for more of an extended period of time. If you're an advanced exerciser, you've been exercising for 6 months or more, you've built an aerobic base, you've played around with expanding your capacity, now you can start to extend your threshold. I'm going to pull these apart a little bit more in part 3. And then if you're super advanced, which means that you've been exercising for a year or more, and you've already played with some of these other variables, then I know you might not be able to see it very well, periodize for optimal results, which means you're going to spend some seasons in higher intensity, and then you're going to spend some seasons in lower intensity. That is really important to see the results that you want to see. And again, weight loss, weight management versus peak fitness, going to be different. So it really depends on the particular goal. All right, last slide that we're going to cover today, and I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because again, this is foreshadowing for part 3. Do you like this? I feel like it's good to entice you to come to part 3. Okay, good. When we talk about building an aerobic base, I'm talking about steady state training. That's being in the blue or the green for 10 minutes or more, up to 60 or more minutes. Now, when you're first starting out, smaller duration. That's what I was recommending. Add duration on a little bit at a time. That's the variable you're manipulating. A little more duration over time. So first you play with duration, and then you play with frequency. If you're doing 2 days a week at 20 minutes, do 2 days a week at 25 minutes before you add in a 3rd day a week. Does that make sense? When we get into expanding capacity and expanding threshold, we're going to do things like tempo and pace training and threshold training and high intensity interval training known as HIIT. Fun stuff. And when we do that, we're playing in different intensities, and I'm going to pull these apart a little bit more when we get to part 3. A little resource to let you know about. Emily and I are master trainers now for MyZone, and we do every Friday a Fitness Friday broadcast that is live, and it's also captured and then put onto YouTube. So we've got YouTube videos on the MyZone channel on YouTube that you can watch. They're free! And they're covering these different types of training using the MyZone system. So if you go onto YouTube, www.youtube.com, and you search for the MyZone channel, all of our videos are available for you to watch. And that's, I think I put that here. Yeah. Or you can go to the MyZone website, myzone.org, and I'll have this as a PDF on the website again so that you guys can have access to this. You can see all of the blogs that we've written and all of the videos that we've done for MyZone on the MyZone website. And with that, ladies and gents, thank you. And do you have any other questions that I can respond to briefly or keep in mind for part 3? Okay. Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. if you would please take I forgot what these are called. Thank you, an evaluation, and fill it out and turn it in at the service desk. We would greatly appreciate it. I have pens available for you if you need them. You can fill it out in here or up at the service desk, whatever your preference. I'm going to put the pens up on the credenza, and I'm available if you have questions. Come on down.
Do you have more pens?
Yeah, right up here. Raise your hand if you'd like one.
I know. Thank you.
I can't guarantee that they're working order. I have more of those now. So you might let me know.
What's the title of this?
There you go. Heart rate training 101, 201. There you go.
How do you enable that?
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna go grab my phone because I want to show it to you. That's the easiest way. And we'll be right back. Yeah, I sure did that right up there on the photos. Yep.
It's 13.
Anyone else need a card?
Oh, those are the blanks?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Which zone are you in?
I'm in the grave. How's life, buddy? How are you?
I don't think I'll ever get out.
You got it all.
Aye.
Oh, now at least I remember to go to my locker and pick up my stuff.
Wherever you have your moving at, just wherever you think you're at, so on.
There's the 13th. I have a number.
That's it. You guys have
Yes. Yeah. Yes, because
Somewhere in
you go to the doctor. You can print off a copy of your vitals for the whole year. And it will tell you how much time it's been and give it to you when you get your vitals. And that's just one part. It's a good thing.
I think I'll just, I think I'll put any weights.
Just a minute.
You don't get tired. I guess I don't.
Awesome.
I don't enjoy myself very much.
Yeah.
Because I never go out of work.
No, you have a baseline. You have a training effect.
Yeah.
More than,
Yeah.
more than what you were probably doing before.
No, if I could get any.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you don't have to prove anybody quality. You're just showing up here. You're in good shape.
But my heart rate, my normal heart rate is 55. Yeah, we just went grab some. Maybe on the side.
Take time off if you're sore, and then it's hard to get back into it after that. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Very good.
And then I go
That's
over,
great.
that's
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think it's the other way. It's like this side goes down because they're gonna fall off. Yeah, I got it. I think the back side goes down. Netting sand. So just like yeah. Like August. It's like the last week of August. Yeah. Thank you guys. Yeah, that's right. And then they slide on from the top. Yeah, they'll just It's definitely gets a little light on campus. Okay. Well,
I mean, the campus is really good.
Yeah, they're definitely.
I've tried doing that.
I'm just gonna help Sarah down like this. Yeah. And then if you go to the home page, this shows you your profile. That's my diamond status that I was writing about. And then the next thing after your target next. And then you can go to workout. And that will show where it shows you some practice, where it will show you your live anniversary. Or you can go to the calendar. This is where it will show you every single workout. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot.
I bet you could.
It depends, maybe when it's really high.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, fire away. Fire away, sister.
I just joined a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a new member.
Yeah. Well done.
And I'm kind of starting out slowly, and then so you kind of like reinforced what I was doing when you said in the class, you know, when you're just starting out. The thing is, I used to be like really athletic, like we're talking 20 years ago. I used to do the little triathlons and stuff. You know, I did all that. You know, I used to run. I only did one marathon,
Sorry,
but I did tons of half